Welcome back to another episode of The Edge. I'm Eagles Eric. Today it's going to be a solo pod, but I really want to talk to the Eagles fans today. So as people start to filter in here, we'll just invite all your questions and answer them. And I'll just start talking about the game until you guys start to filter in here. So Eagles, just after playing the Giants 2 weeks ago, they have them again. And they haven't had a division game since they played the Cowboys back in week one. And division games, they're always anomalous. You know, you could come in and be clearly the better team. I believe the Eagles were like 7.5 point favorites at MetLife, and they got blown out. Now, when that line was initially set, obviously we didn't know all about Jalen Carter. We didn't know that Quinyon Mitchell would get hurt in the first quarter, and it was hard to overcome those things. But I don't necessarily think that game was indicative of either of these teams. So we'll start to kind of just parse through some of these stats as people come in here. If you are in here, I invite you to ask questions. I really want to start a dialogue today. Um, there's not a lot more film study given that they only played one game, which, by the way, it was a crazy game where they gave up 33 points in the fourth quarter to lose by one. But getting into it, the Eagles, they are 56% pass and neutral downs, which actually it was closer to 50-50 early in their year. And kind of starting in that Broncos game, started to supplant some of those runs with the RPOs. They threw a fair bit against the Vikings as well. But even despite that, their pass strength is only 20th. Meanwhile, the Giants, they're very close to 50-50. They're 28th in neutral down pass rank. And I actually did a study on this, which was looking at second down. First and 10, it's really going to tell you about the strengths of your team, right? If you come out and you have Joe Burrow, you don't have a great offensive line, you don't have a good run game, and you got superstar receivers and the Joe Burrow, of course you're going to throw. And vice versa with the Eagles last year, first down run rates are through the roof. Third down, if you're way behind the sticks, of course you're going to throw. If you're able to get third and fours, third and threes, third and twos, you're going to be running a lot like, you see the Lions doing that in the Eagles because they had the tush push to rely on. But in between, I think you really learn about teams. And Dable has an extreme bias towards running on second down. If they are 2nd and 7, they're running most of the time. If they're 2nd and 4, they're running most of the time. Sometimes teams are going, oh, we're ahead of the sticks. Now we could take a shot on second down. Not Dable. I don't necessarily know why that is. I think he's a guy, probably speculating that he's a guy who always wants to stay ahead of the sticks. And he feels like, if he had a mildly successful play on first down, let's give it a third and manageable. But as I say with the Eagles, it's better than getting a third and manageable, just getting a first down. If you can do that on first down, that's amazing. And often you'll see the best offenses in EPA per play each season tend to be the highest first down conversion rates, getting a first down on first down. The Eagles are not doing that. Obviously, the Giants are not doing that. And really, it's third down aversion. I'd rather than getting third and threes, third and fours, I'd rather just not have third down at all in a perfect world. So when does he go against that trend? You start to see in the red zone when they're on third down, they will throw it deep into the end zone often, where they're like, oh, we're probably resigned to a field goal, but let's take a shot. Other than that, second down runs is a big tendency. He's almost 3 standard deviations above the mean over the last couple seasons. Dable is. It's ridiculous. So as pass heavy as Cincinnati is on offense, on even first and second down, Dable's even more run heavy. you're talking about a 50% disparity in certain down and distance or certain distance to go, certain field positions between Cincinnati and the Giants. Shotgun, both teams are near the top of the league. The Giants don't run a lot of under center. They don't have the personnel necessarily to pull that off. Although I think you're going to start to see teams, they're looking over at what Indianapolis is doing, how they're supporting their quarterback, Daniel Jones, and they are using quite a bit of under center. And they are absolutely cooking. So we saw Eagles go more under center last game. Is that here to stay? You hope so. I don't necessarily think under center is conducive to the strengths and weaknesses of the team. But as Mailata said, it makes your run direction less predictable. It gives you the chance to set up play action, because if you think about it, a play action on a shotgun, it's this, and then you're pulling. The amount of time that the defensive line and linebackers are essentially taking time to decipher what is happening in a shotgun, it's okay, he has it or he doesn't. Whereas play action, it's step, handoff. Oh, did he hand it off? Now we move the pocket over here. It could be a second more. And then that basically you have chance for routes to develop a lot more than they would had it had out of shotgun before the defense can start to react to that. So if you want to use play action, I think under center is a good place to use it, but you also have to probably run it under center. And the Eagles haven't really shown the ability to do that. And one of the big problems, if you want to run under center, you want to run a decent bit of gap scheme. And the Eagles have a shoot gap scheme almost entirely. You only see it here and there. If you have to guess the reason why, they're insulating their injured interior line. And in gap scheme, often you're having one of those three interior players pulling. So if they don't want to get those guys on the move, they're going to call zone runs. Penalties, the Giants actually commit a ton of penalties. They're 26th in the NFL, but they draw the most. Is that statistical noise? To some extent, yes. Is it home field favoritism? I don't know. But the Eagles rarely get calls on the opponent. And that goes back to last year. They had some of the worst numbers with opponents being called for penalties. Opposing offenses almost never got called for penalties last year. Well, that's continuing this year. They simply don't call holding on the other team's offense. Turnovers, Eagles have a really good turnover rate on offense, and that's by design. They play turnover reverse football, not throwing into tight windows, not throwing over the intermediate middle, not throwing it into traffic downfield usually. But they haven't generated much on defense, only 21st in the league. Giants have generated even less turnovers on their defense. And they have turned it over on offense. I wouldn't call it an egregious rate at 1.8, but it's 22nd in the NFL. You're going to have that with, a rookie quarterback at the helm. And trying to think of, if who's had fumbles on their team. I don't know. I don't think Scatterbo is particularly fumble prone. Okay, getting some comments in here. If you're just joining, head over to YouTube. I'm going to be taking your comments for this whole episode. Little Griffith says, I'm a big fan of the Eagles season. Better kick Giants' butt. If I recall, there was a message like that last week that said, I'm a big fan of Eagles season. Better kick Vikings' butt. So I appreciate you. They didn't kick the Vikings' butt, but they did come away with a victory. Jam- Jamari Givens. Jamari says, do the Eagles offense still have a chance against this giant defense without AJ Brown? And if we just look, well, why don't we bring it up here? So let's look at the Eagles offensive stats without AJ Brown over the last 3 seasons. Take a look. Now, this isn't going to give you the full context, but 2 wins, 2 losses, and one of them was that stinker in New Orleans where they didn't score until the very end with Saquon's long run and the Goddard mesh play. Yeah, I mean, they did not. They had that game. They struggled against Atlanta. Their defense was playing good at the time. They struggled mightily against New Orleans till the end. Horrible outing against Buccaneers, and they were missing Smith and Lane Johnson. And then what was this game against the Giants? Oh, this is the last game of the season. And so those are all bad. I feel like there's some games that are being left out here. All right. Yeah, so some of that predates, but yeah, overall they struggled a lot without AJ Brown. But this Giants defense is not good. Let's get into that real quick here. It's a little bit hard to see, but the Giants defensive EPA is 26 in the NFL. And why is that? Well, they're middle of the pack against the pass, 14th. They're last in the league against rushing. That's why when I came into the last game, I'm going, oh, they're going to kick ass in the rushing because the Giants defense is horrible. And this is a get right game. While it didn't happen, a lot of people have wanted to say, why isn't the run game getting going? And we've talked about it a lot on this network, but it's multifaceted. If you're not running gap scheme, that's one reason. Why aren't you doing that? Because your guys are injured. Then when you're running, when you have Brett Tothin, well, you have let's just go across the line. Jordan Mailata, last year, one of the best run blocking seasons from a tackle in the last decade. This year, good, I would say. I wouldn't even call him great this year. I'd say so. You go from like nearly historically good run blocking to just good. That's a downgrade. Dickerson, unbelievable run blocking, responsible for the most key blocks by my charting on Saquon 10 plus yard runs last year. He became below average. And then you mix in Toth. So you go from potentially the best run blocking guard in the NFL or close to it to below average. Huge downgrade. Cam Jurgens, really good run blocker last year, but below average this year. Mekhi Becton, volatile, but overall, really good. Really, Jurgens, Dickerson, and Becton, they had more pass protection struggles, but I would say in run blocking, they were good, really good. Lane Johnson, really good last year and this year. He looks really good. So you have 4 spots where it was either a decent size to large downgrade just in what the personnel can do. Well, right there, you're probably going to go from, a top 4 or 5 rushing attack down to middle of the pack. Then you couple that with predictable tendencies, running into stacked boxes, linebackers triggering downhill, and then you become one of the worst rushing attacks. That's kind of how I see it. There's still an opportunity to get the rushing game going against the Giants. I've highlighted same side runs. If you haven't seen it, I invite you to go look at my tweet. I posted about, 6 6 or 7 plays and one from last year where it's shotgun, same side run, and it goes for big yardage. And I'm sure if you looked at the stats on that, it would be through the roof in terms of its success rate. And the reason I posted that is because Mailata was talking about how for under center, yes, it's better angles for the blockers, but and also it makes you less predictable about directionality, but you don't need to be predictable in your directionality from shotgun runs. You can run shotgun, same side toss. One of my favorite plays I always talk about. Shotgun, same side power. So you have the guard on the weak side coming over, and then you just hand it off, same side. Duo, which they never run. That's the center and guard, and a guard and tackle, double teaming the interior. And it's great because then your bookends are amazing players. So you get the advantage of insulating your interior run blocking because you're getting overt double teams. Sometimes on these zone schemes, it's okay, I'm helping for a second, then I'm trying to get to the second level, and you don't quite win that initial block. And that is true for duo as well, but I think it's a little bit more of an overt double team where you're just trying to beat that guy at the point of attack before you worry about getting up to the linebacker. And there's others. You can run zone, same side zone out of shotgun. You can run counter is a huge one, and they've actually been successful running counter out of same side shotgun runs. In my opinion, philosophically, why do you need to be 80-20 running to the opposite side of the center? Yes, it's a better angle for the back to kind of build up momentum, but teams just slant towards that direction. They cancel gaps post snap. They trigger on the across the opposite side run. Suddenly you have nothing. I'd rather delay the running back, let the blocks develop for half a second, and then just go to where there's less guys and they're not expecting you. In my opinion, it should be like a 55-45 split. I don't know if there's any teams in the NFL that are doing that, but there's no justification for it, in my opinion. Bread Eclipse asks, interested to see how the offense adjusts with AJ Brown out of the picture. I feel like they didn't do a great job when he was there last year. That is true. We just looked at it. They haven't adjusted well. What is the answer? Well, I think spreading the field out. The last thing I want you to do is go, oh no, we don't have our superstar receiver. Let's turtle up, bring a bunch of tight ends on the field, invite stack boxes, and run into the mess. That's a disaster. Spread it out. Go empty. Then motion Saquon into the backfield. Run it against a 6-man box. Have some, more eye candy, so a little bit more motion. Throw in a pony package. Get some RPOs going. It's more scheme based. One of the reasons they probably stink without him is because they don't have a lot of scheme wins. A lot of their wins are our guys are better than yours. Well, when your guys aren't there, they're no longer better, and then you have nothing else. More comment. Eric, I know you've been big on the scramble drill situation. There's an obvious improvement last week. Do you think there's anything more they can build off of, or there's a threat of opponents adapting? I don't necessarily think teams go unless you're playing like a Baltimore or a Buffalo or a Commanders. I don't really think you go into the game being like, okay, we need to nail these scramble drill rules. This is how we want to play when the guy breaks the pocket. So no, I don't think that's necessarily going to be neutralized. And it wasn't just the last game. It started before that. You could see a concerted effort starting in the Giants game. They made some nice, there were some play. So Broncos game, it was egregious. So they probably went and said, this is an area of focus. Came back in the Giants game. There was like 3 plays where Hurts normally would have turned into a running back. He looked upfield, made a completion downfield. And that's good. And then we saw it again in the Vikings game. It's a big development. It's because of the exact thing I had been banging the table for a long time, which is forget the low, medium, high BS where the scramble drill rules. Work back to the quarterback. That's all you got to do. Everyone work back to the quarterback. That's it. So I hope that continues to be something that they can do. And if you want to convert on 3rd and long, 3rd and medium, scramble drill's a great way to do it. Devontae didn't impress as much as expected when Brown was out in 2024. Neither did Goddard outside of the Saints game. Wonder if Smith can do better this time, especially given how good he's looked. And I think a lot of this is back to what I just said earlier. They didn't have a lot of scheme wins. One of the big plays against Goddard, they schemed up a little cop route, which is a corner post, beat the safety across the face. I believe it was on play action. That's a scheme win. Great. But if you just go over there and they go, oh, all they have is Devontae. Let's just roll the coverage over there. Maybe we can blitz. They don't have a lot of, like, AJ's their most potent blitz counter. Take that away. They've got nothing. But I don't necessarily expect the Giants to be blitz heavy. Although if they're without Brian Burns, maybe they are going to bring more blitzes than we typically would see. That's a huge loss. Brian Burns absolutely destroyed the left side of the Eagles' offensive line on a couple stunts. So, yeah, he even beat Mailata clean on 1 rep. So he's a problem. If he's out, that's a big deal. Now, one thing maybe not talked about is Abdul Carter is putting up like historic rates for like pressure for a rookie, quick pressures. I don't really recall him doing that much in the game while I was there, but maybe they're going to line him up on the other side, put Thibodeau over Lane Johnson, and then you got to worry because whoever's playing left guard for the Eagles, they're going to have to worry about Abdul Carter on some stunts. All right. If you're just joining, I'd invite you to throw some questions in the chat on YouTube. Bread Eclipse, why is the creative run blocking like pin and pull and trap all of a sudden vanished like Johnny has talked about? Are they worried about health limiting their guys? And I did talk about this earlier, probably before you joined, that it's likely to insulate for the offensive lineman's health. It's a successful run for them. When they are healthy, it plays to their strengths. You can take back the numbers. But if they don't think those guys can pull and get on the move, they're not going to do it. All right. Before any more questions come in, just going to kind of go back through this matchup. Giants run league high rates of cover 1. As we know, Eagles do amazing against cover 1. But one of the big reasons they do amazing against cover 1 is because A.J. Brown has been the best receiver against cover 1 in the NFL over the last couple seasons. Without him, they probably go from amazing against cover 1 to probably just above average. So I actually do think the Giants will play more man than they did in the first matchup with AJ out. I still think that benefits Hurts because he can pull the trigger with confidence in man coverage much more than he can against too high zone. And people will say, well, look at the Vikings. Look what he was able to do against their zone. And one of the truths is they're running a ton of hot too. So they have 5 guys in coverage. There's big voids and still isolations. So it becomes quasi-man for one guy out there. Hurts is amazing against man. There's 20-yard voids on the field because they're bringing 6. Hurts can throw into that void. But when it's true zone coverage where it's unclear if there's any isolation opportunities and there's not huge voids, that's where we see the hesitation. That's where we see aimless routes that don't influence any of the zone defenders. That's where we see scrambles and throwaways. Right. Getting back into, let's look at this holistically. Eagles offense versus the Giants defense. Eagles middle of the pack for pass EPA. They got a big boost from last week by one of the Hurts's best EPA pass performances in his career. Rushing, they're still middle of the pack, but a lot of that's buoyed by quarterback scrambles. But there's still an opportunity to run against the worst ranked rush defense in the NFL from the Giants. The Giants have this vaunted pass rush, but they're 24th in the NFL in sack rate, which is good because the Eagles have given up a ton of sacks at 9%, 28th in the NFL. Eagles have been terrible on third down. Last year, they were really good on third down. But chicken or the egg? Is it because they keep getting into disadvantageous third down situations? I think that's a big part of it. And the stats back that up. If you look at 3rd and 5+ as a percentage of total third downs, I think they're like 28th in the NFL. So they're seeing a ton of third and longs. Well, it's really hard to convert third and longs. Scramble drills help. Explosives, they're starting to get back towards the middle of the pack. They used to be down near the bottom earlier in the season. Giants are middle of the pack in surrendering explosives. Early down EPA, Giants are vulnerable because their run defense is so bad when teams like to run, but the Eagles have been terrible on early downs. So that kind of wraps that one up. Getting into the Giants offense versus the Eagles defense, both middle of the pack. Same thing on the passing offense versus passing defense. Same thing on the rushing offense versus the rushing defense. Eagles have a really low sack rate, as we know. They've had more opportunities for a lot more sacks, but they haven't finished them. Even in the Giants game, they probably missed about 4 sacks, just not being able to wrangle Dart. But the Giants are vulnerable. They give up a bunch of sacks. Third downs, the Giants actually have been pretty good. Maybe there's something to Daboll's running on second down, keeping it manageable. Eagles on both sides of the ball. Third down offense, third down defense, terrible. Last year, those were both really good. Eagles have given up a lot of explosives. Last year, they were one of the best in the league. Sorry, they haven't given up a lot of explosives, just 5%. Last year, that was one of their calling cards. I think they were like first or second in the league in giving up the least explosives. Giants haven't generated much. Without Malik Neighbors, it's really hard to generate explosive plays. And they've been terrible in the red zone. Eagles have been the best red zone defense in the NFL. Without that, their defense would be way lower ranked. So that's been huge for them. It's been a true bend, not break. This is a huge factor. Eagles gave up a bunch of touchdowns in the first game. Well, they should be able to hunker down and give up field goals, not touchdowns. The stats would suggest the Giants are going to get a bunch of field goals and not touchdowns in this game. Darius Slayton, I think he will be returning from injury. I don't know if that's a big deal. Comment here. Looks like Calcaterra is ready for Sunday. Welcome back, 12 and 13 personnel. And the irony is they've actually been passing extremely well from 12 personnel. Maybe because they're so predictable, because they are running it so often that when they do pass, it's successful. Calcaterra is a horrible blocker, but they've had success at times running away from him with quarterback scrambles on pass plays in 12 personnel. So I don't think the stats do a good job of giving context to their heavy packages. I think for the most part, they haven't been good. 13 personnel is obviously a disaster because they're not really passing out of those formations and they have a bunch of bad blockers on the field. And it would be even worse if they do. I'm fine with 12 personnel this week because Dotson is not that good for this offense. He doesn't offer much. So if you want to supplant him with the tight end at times, I'm totally fine with it. It'll be interesting to see what other receiver they play this week. I don't know if they're going to be having Darius Cooper on the active roster, but I like 12 personnel. But I want you to be multiple out of it. Some teams run 12 personnel and they run empty. Where's that? 12 personnel and spread. How about 21 personnel? What you don't have to put this gun split set where you have two running backs on either side of the quarterback. Sometimes I feel like those are stale. One of the best ways to use 21 personnel is you have one back here, and then you have one back who becomes effectively your motion guy. So, we give it on a sweep. We fake it on the sweep, and then we give it to the handoff. We fake the handoff, and then we throw it into the flat on the RPO to the motion guy. Right there, you have a 3-play package. That would be great. Got to imagine Fangio is pissed about how much Dart ran on them. I mean, he's been harping on the quarterback scrambles for the whole season because they faced so many of them. Hopefully, Jalen Carter being back will help with their ability to contain. But do you think Fangio would have looked to put a spy? I think they did a pretty good job against some of the scramblers earlier in the year. They gave up. They had big voids against Dart. A couple of times they couldn't grab him. Like they were in on him, but they couldn't grab him. Are we going to see that contain rush like they did against Mayfield? Cage rushing him, maybe. But they also got burned on that Jihad Campbell, Bucky Irving 70-yard touchdown or whatever it was. They basically rushed like this, stopped, waited for Baker to scramble, didn't try to get past their guy, and then boop, they give up the long touchdown. So it's a fine balance. You can't just say we're not going to try to get in on the quarterback. Really, what you want to do, if I was trying to build a team and coach a defensive line, I want it to just slowly collapse evenly from all sides like this. Just converge on the quarterback. I saw guys getting over eager, trying to just beat their guy, giving escape lanes because they're trying to go around their guy. So they probably just need Jalen Carter. He could have a great bull rush. Brandon Graham, he should help. He has a great bull rush. Uche, when he's in a wide 9, you see it on film, and he gets that running start. He gets a lot of knockback. So that's how that's how I'd want to run against Dart. I'd have Uche and Graham just plow into the line, converge like this. Don't go too far upfield. Even if you're not able to sack him, just keep trying to drive the tackle back. Interior line, one guy pushing the pocket. If the other guy has an opportunity to win, that's okay. The problem is when you have two guys trying to go around the outside of a player, then it just becomes a free for all with escape lanes. So it's definitely going to be an emphasis. The Broncos are the first team that stopped Dart from running for a bunch of yards. All right. I could have never predicted we sign a wide receiver. Find another good wide receiver as UDFA. They'll then never run 11 personnel. Yeah. And I wish, and I've talked about this a lot, I wish that third wide receiver was these components: vertical threat to take the top off defenses and allow AJ and Devontae to work in the intermediate. Gadget player, run, sweeps, screens, stuff like this. Or a dominant blocker, Dotson's 0 for 3. And if you just have him like running non-threatening clear out routes or backside like 15-yard outs and digs, when are you going to hit him? That's why his volume is incredibly low. I think people say, like, you know, last year they made the excuse, he doesn't trust Dotson. And then this year it's like, oh, you know, they're a low volume team and that nobody's getting going. It's like the plays they're designing, what's the opportunity to throw to him? There's no opportunity to throw to him. That's why he's not getting volume. So, you know, a guy like a Marvin Mims would help this offense. It would make them, they're probably help their run game too. Certainly help their screen game and stretch the field a bit. A Turpin, this is greedy, but like a Rashid Shaheed, all those type of players would help this offense tremendously. Johnny Wilson, this guy asks, does the offense miss Johnny Wilson? The thing is, he struggled so much as a receiver. You know, it's hard to say, but yes, he helped a lot in blocking. I actually think he's straight up a better blocker than Calcaterra, literally straight up. Now, I don't think you can put him in line with a hand on the ground, but if you're just talking about, oh, you're throwing a bubble screen, I'd rather have Wilson blocking over Calcaterra easily. So yes, they missed the blocking. It looks like he was improved receiver before he went out for the season. So you could say that. Also, a big target, if you're trying to find voids and zones, that's nice to have a big target, because then you can throw that layered pass a little bit high in the window and you have that big target who can box out corners, who you can throw over that linebacker level and he's right there. Whereas you have Dotson kind of like trying to find soft spots and zones, and he's just like this little guy who often gets rerouted by underneath defenders. You're never going to be able to hit that. All right. Probably go for 5 or 10 more minutes here. If you're just joining, I'd invite you to ask questions. We have the deepest wide receiver room in the league. You know, well, that's a debatable point, but we never use them. Patullo or Sirianni decided to cheat off McVay's test. I guess you're saying like because the Rams don't use Atwell and Whittington much. But they don't need to, because Nacua gets open more than any receiver in the NFL by the tracking data. And he's one of the best receivers in the NFL, and they're able to scheme him open. They use him as a move receiver. They put him in the slot. The Eagles don't really do that. When the Eagles put Devontae in motion, it's flying across the formation, and then he's just kind of jogging into some flat route or some wheel route that's not completely out of the progression. Whereas the Rams will like have a split set, and then they'll have like Nacua like motion inside, and then he like wins leverage on basically like 80% of his value is created on some form of inbreaker. So it's either just a shallow cross or a dig or a skinny post or a deep over. Like, it's unbelievable how he just wins on inbreakers. But the Eagles don't do that. Howie seems to have an infatuation with undersized finesse edge rushers. And I think I can't speculate as to the reason as why they got so many of these situational pass rushers, but they obviously have been missing a stout edge. I'm sure it's a collaboration between him and Fangio. Also, it's like who is available. If you're going to go and you're going to only sign pay up for Ojulari at $4 million. Everyone else is pretty much a vet minimum. What are you going to get? I think that's more of the case of they weren't going to pony up for an edge. So you end up getting guys with one skill, not players who are well-rounded like a Carl Granderson, not players who are only really stout against the run. Trying to think of a good example, AJ Epinesa, something like that. But they need that skill set. I think Brandon Graham gives them that to some extent. I expect him to play on early downs a fair bit. I don't expect him to play on third downs much at all. We didn't see him play on third downs in the Super Bowl, not even one snap. So I'd love if the Eagles got Dennis Sutton. That's from Penn State. I don't know if he's Howie's type. I think he's everyone's type. I think he's a projected first round pick. Ryan Swope says, yo, what's up? They can't actually use 12 personnel to scheme Puka. They actually use 12 personnel to scheme Puka open. They do. One of the best things they do is they'll start Puka in like a condensed alignment and the tight end on the line attached. And then they motion the tight end out wide. And then everyone bumps over. And then you get him like either on a nickel or a Sam linebacker, and it's game over. It also makes it hard to like double team and really like collapse coverage on one guy when you're doing that, moving them into different alignments, moving them across the formation, moving guys adjacent to them, and attacking parts of the field where corners aren't. Do I think Darius Cooper gets playing time? Well, they activated his practice window on a Thursday, which is unusual, which we saw with AJ Brown, who did not practice 3 times in a row, then got rolled out. That would indicate maybe he will be activated. But what I could easily envision is he'll be active and then hardly see the field, and then everyone will be frustrated. I don't know what he's capable of against starting level competition. I liked what I saw. There needs to be a comfort level with the quarterback, obviously. And they're not even scheming their star wide receivers open, let alone a guy who was a UDFA. So Shane's talked about how defensive tackle is the position he'd most want in an in-season acquisition. Personally, I don't. I don't know what that says. Personally, I don't. Between adding a bulkier edge and a DT, but is there anyone you think they could add? Well, how about a hybrid between the two? How about Cam Jordan? Saints are a dumpster fire. His contract's not big. He can set the edge. He can play inside and pass rush. Has a ton of experience, veteran leader, a lot of will. Like, he's a charged up player. I have no idea. He might be a guy who wants to just retire with the Saints. I have no idea, but that would be an awesome player to add. I don't agree that DT is their biggest need at all. I think edge is obviously a bigger need. But the counter argument to that is, they get Nolan Smith back after the bye. You get Brandon Graham. Then Uche and Hunt are your backups, or they split snaps with Hunt. And you have a decent edge room, and I understand that argument. But I still don't see a vaunted pass rush there, and you don't even know like what Smith is going to be when he comes back. You don't know what BG is going to be when he comes back. So edge to me is still an unknown. Cornerback, that's why I want to play Jacorian Bennett this week. Find out what you have. You're not going to find out totally, but you're going to find out more than you would had he not played. And the alternative is one more week of development for Keely Ringo, who, even if he does come up to speed, he's still not great. Like, When I broke him down in the offseason, I was saying, all things being equal around him, like last year's defense, he could be an adequate CB2. Well, all things are not equal. The pass rush isn't nearly what it was last year. You're seeing issues in other parts of the defense. And there were he looked fairly good in the Tampa game. 2 bad missed tackles, and we know that's a problem for him, but it was doable. And the rest of it hasn't been good. And as more snaps occur, you're always updating your viewpoint with more new information. And the new information is he has no poise. He panics and rips open his hips and gets in a full sprint backwards because he's afraid. When the ball's in the air, he'll grab and hit the player and mistime his jumps because he's not calm and collected. That's hard, in my opinion, to fix. A big part of that is how you're wired. Unless you're going to a sports psychologist, you can't. A position coach can't be like, Keely, you just got to relax when the ball's in the air, or if you're a step behind, don't panic. That doesn't really work like that. You know what I mean? So that's a problem. That might be something that he never overcomes. And then you don't have a real corner. You can't be a real corner in the NFL. All right. A couple more comments here before we get out of here. Ryan says, let's be honest. When we're saying we want Hurts to pass more, we just meant stop with the constant 5-10 yard passes and average around 220 yards per game, not 100 to 180 yards per game. We didn't mean pass 40 times per game. Incorporate more mid to long throws downfield, 7 to 10 per game. You said this last week. 10 deep throws per game. I mean, one of the things is you can't preordain what you're going to do coming into a game. What is the defense going to do? Are you holding up on the offensive line? What is the score in the game? Is your defense holding their offense? You have to be mutable. That's one of the problems with the Eagles offense. They haven't been flexible. Their second half adjustments have been terrible, except for one game. So I hear you. I think, if anything, the intermediate area of the field is what they've been eschewing. They've thrown a ton of short passes. They've thrown a fair bit of deep passes, but they have thrown the least in the NFL to the middle of the field distance-wise, but obviously also location-wise. And if you're not an under center play action team, I can understand why you're going to be low in intermediate middle of the field throws. That's where you target on under center play action. Draw the linebackers, throw a dig behind them, right? But can you throw a 12-yard comeback to AJ and Devontae on the outside? Can you run a speed out? Can you run like a pirate? That's where you have 2 receivers to one side. Everyone hates the 2x2s, but instead of running the in and the corner, you run the in and then a deeper in. You can attack the middle of the field against 2 high zone that way. In all honesty, I don't care how they look this Sunday against the Giants. Survive and get the win. More curious about the bye. It's a fair comment. And I think there's a really good chance they win. Will AJ being out force Patul to scheme these guys open? Remains to be seen. Bennett and BG are out. Is that official? I haven't seen that. Because on PHLY today, all right, here we go. Ruled out. Bennett is out. Cam Jurgens out. AJ Brown out. Brandon Graham out. Well, that stinks. Maybe they won't win now. That's a lot of players that matter that are missing. So that means Kelee Ringo will play. Fortunately, the Giants don't have a good receiving core, but that didn't stop little Jordan Humphrey for destroying him last time. They ran a safety blitz with Blankenship, and he got destroyed on a crosser against Wan'Dale Robinson. I actually hope they blitz more than they did the first game. I think we're going to see some blitzing. What is my current evaluation of 2025 Jalix Hunt? When they drafted him, if you said this is what he would be at this point, I would say that makes a lot of sense. That's fairly encouraging. You know, if you said that after last year's playoffs, you would say that's a little bit disappointing. It's, you know, run defense, I'd say it's been okay, not great. Pass rush, there's been times where he's done a good job collapsing the pocket. Teams are getting the ball out quick a lot. He doesn't seem to have much of a move set at all, which is fine. But like you would need to have either really good speed or really good power to offset that. So he kind of just he doesn't have a dominant bull rush. He doesn't have a dominant fast get off, and he doesn't have a developed pass rush repertoire. So what are your ways of winning? It's like high effort or playing a bad tackle. So overall, like, you know, for a third round pick, probably in what his like 12th game in terms of if you're just looking at snap wise, probably ahead of schedule, especially considering that he was a project player. But the Eagles need more than that. Yeah, that's brutal how many guys are out. So, all right. Well, I feel like we covered a lot of ground this week. I pretty much am going to be on every post game show the rest of the season. So we always invite you to turn those on, win, lose, or draw. But until next week, this has been another episode of Eagles Edge.